Moulin Rouge is a musical romantic drama film that's celebrating 20 years since it first came out this year. It's set in 1899 and tells the story of a young and naive bohemian writer, Christian, Ewan McGregor, who falls in love with a charming courtesan, Satine, Nicole Kidman. The two struggle with the reconciliation of their dreams with reality, whilst trying to keep their love alive amidst the chaos and adversities of life. I'm not at all ashamed to admit that I love this movie profoundly, and I've genuinely seen it at least 100 times. It's incredibly rich in terms of mythology and symbolism, which I think is the reason I somehow keep finding myself returning to it time and time again. This movie successfully intertwines comedy and tragedy in a slightly cliché but at the same time revolutionary juxtaposition. It's capable of painting an expression of delightful bliss on your face, make you tear up and cringe in displeasure all in one go, carving a bright, unforgettable memory in your mind palace. Why is that though? I decided to dedicate this forgotten jewel a video to unravel its profundity along with its hidden mythological meaning and symbolism, and perhaps with an aim to encourage more people to give it a view and appreciate this underrated piece of art. Dissecting the story's symbolism. The story follows the classical principles of the hero's journey. Christian is called to an adventure by his desire to partake in the Bohemian Revolution.
The world had been swept up in a Bohemian Revolution, and I had travelled from London to be a part of it.
His father disapproves and warns him of the dangers of the underworld. He sees Christian's naivety clearly, which presents a danger for him to remain in the bliss of childhood instead of emerging from it into reality, which, as we'll see later, is exactly what happens. The father is the conscience and voice of reason here, which is ignored by the childish, adventurous spirit of Christian.
It was not as my father had said.
A village of sin.
This is what happens in The Lion King, for example, when Simba's adventurousness leads to his ignorance of his father's warnings, causes his subsequent death and downfall of the entire kingdom. This journey thus begins with gradual descendants into the underworld, as is typical. The intervention of the supernatural element, the mediatory stage between the reaching the next stage, the beginning of transformation, here takes place when a narcoleptic Argentinian falls through the roof of Christian's flat. He symbolically falls from the heaven, which emphatically portrays it as a divine intervention. Christian thus meets the Bohemian theatrical group Spectacular and becomes their leading writer. It's emphasized at this point that Christian's values are identical with the Bohemian values, that is freedom, beauty, truth and love. Which all embody his liberal naivety, but also his noble spirit, which, however, later proves to be insufficient. An excess of empathy prevents one from using his weapons when having to face the monsters. This group are Timon and Pumbaa in The Lion King, who indulge Simba in his adventurousness, shielding him from having to confront the reality. He sees the danger of it briefly as he remembers the voice of his father, Reason.
I kept hearing my father's voice in my head.
You end up wasting your life at the Moulin Rouge with Gun.
But his imagination, heart, gets the better of him. His initiation into the group is followed by the scene with a green fairy, whose symbolism is significant here. Apart from being another term for absinthe, it's a parallel to the green fairy Fauna in Sleeping Beauty, who's fickle and irresponsible, but the kindest and most sensitive fairy, and her gift to Aurora is the gift of song. Christian later gives the gift of song to Satine when he sings Your Song to her.
That gift is my song.
Green Fairy here is also the embodiment of the smouldering temptress, the femme fatale counterpart of Christian's anima manifested through Satine. She represents the provocation of the surge of the animalistic and sexual urges that lead to the manifestation of the traits that tempt one to enter the underworld, which is exactly what happens after this scene. This can also be seen as the beginning of a gradual progression into the genital phase of the psychosexual development. Christian and his group thus embark on the journey into the Moulin Rouge to meet Satine, the main star, to persuade Zidler, the owner, to incorporate their play into the shows. This is the descendants into the underworld. In the beginning of the movie, its inhabitants are described as the beautiful creatures of the underworld.
The young and beautiful creatures of the underworld.
Moulin Rouge, the Red Mill, is the representation of the dark aspects of the personality which reside in the unconscious. All the wildest fantasies and repressed desires dwell there.
A kingdom of nighttime pleasures.
It contains what we do had we not been restricted by our conscience. It's what surges disguised in our dreams as wishful thinking we deny in the awake state. Christian is at first delighted as he sees its tantalizing beauty, and his adventurous spirit gets fascinated by the novelty of the experience. But as soon as he discovers its dark aspects and individual challenges he'll have to face, one-on-one meeting with Satine for example, he becomes appalled and tries to leg it.
Don't worry, I'll sally forth.
But is kept in by the group, who are the mediators that initiate one into the reality, like Zazu in The Lion King or Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. This parallels the temptation of the snake in Eden, Adam's reluctance and Eve's persuasion. As we'll later see, this leads to the loss of the bliss of innocence, emergence of the consciousness from it, and with it the onset of suffering, just like what follows the fall from Eden. The abandonment of the pluripotentiality of the childhood dreams comes at a cost, but it's a must. Christian thus descends into the underworld, another main stage of the hero's journey, and his meeting with Satine represents the revelation element of it. Remember that in the beginning of the story, Christian says that he intends to write about love, but he's never experienced it. That's when the Argentinian falls in through the roof. Here's where love is revealed to him. It's important to know that this descendant into the underworld isn't only negative. It represents the crucial stage of the hero's journey, and it's the very reason of the existence of the hero. Christian has to descend in order to bring out his consciousness out of the darkness of the unconscious, and that's achieved through the main task, to rescue Satine, save the mate and slay the dragon, so to speak. Christian's name is of great significance here as well. It means follower of Christ, and that's exactly what he is, as he brings light into the underworld embodied by Satine. To an extent, Satine represents the temptation of Satan, but in the sense that she's the very opposite of Christian and the reason why he descends into the underworld. She herself undergoes transformation from the femme fatale to Dona Angelicata, from the dark aspect of the anima to its light aspect. The meaning of her name is smooth, delicate, soft, which emphasizes her role of an idol-like porcelain doll. That's how she's seen by the world, which has only used her entire life for her beauty and womanhood, for which she doesn't believe in love.
All you need is love.
Love is just a game.
Although she's a dreamer as well, she's aware of the dark aspect of reality, unlike Christian. Christian breaks this image, however, and breathes life into the dead doll, so to speak, just like Geppetto who animates Pinocchio. It's the kiss that revives the Sleeping Beauty, or the Snow White, and love is simultaneously awakened for the first time in the materialistic girl and the unexperienced boy. The pattern is thus of a reversed Beauty and the Beast story, as the beast that has to be transformed is Satine and the naive beauty is Christian. After this emerges Satan, embodied by the Duke and by Zidler, as where there is emergence of the light, the dark must rise to meet it. Now, however, Christian resides in the underworld, as this transformation isn't yet complete, as his encounter with love pronounces his naivety and suspends him in his dream world. That's the underworld in literal sense, in the Moulin Rouge setting. Blinded by this, he fails to notice the dangers lurking round the corner, the Duke, Zidler, envious courtesans, Satine's illness, which culminates in his inability to see through Satine's lie and represents the progression towards the next stages of the hero's journey, that is, resurrection, when he leaves the underworld, atonement, reconciliation with Satine, and return, first to the underworld and then to the harsh reality of life through Satine's death, after which he's changed completely and the journey's finalized. Disillusioned and hurt by love, Christian turns his back on his friends and sags in depression and rage. Here again the helper, Toulouse, Jiminy Cricket, the voice of the conscience, intervenes and plants doubt in Christian's heart, which leads to his return to the underworld and final salvation of Satine and their love, dethronement of Satan, both the Duke and Zidler, and destruction of the underworld. As we see later, Moulin Rouge plunges into bankruptcy and is shut down after Satine's death. How songs lead us through the meaning of the story. Since it's a musical, it's full of songs, but don't be fooled. Their purpose isn't merely to entertain. Their function is to tell the story and foreshadow, so that even if you skipped all the rest of the scenes, you'd understand it. They explain the symbolical meaning of the story even better than the story alone. Let's see how it goes. The film opens up with "There was a boy, very strange, enchanting boy."
There was a boy.
Continues with "Your song, wooing, one day I'll fly away, the dreams, the elephant's medley." That's the dialogue between the lovers and eruption of love. Like a virgin. Ironic symbolism of Satine, who really is a virgin in terms of love though. Come what may, the lovers surrender to their fate and promise of everlasting love through the adversities of life. El Tango Roxanne, the evil of the materialistic world that aims to destroy the love and produces jealousy. To the show must go on, the betrayal of love for this materialistic world, although it's a farce, and culminates in the Hindi Sad Diamonds, the apparent victory of the materialistic above the transcendental values of love, only to be finished off by Come What May again, the lovers' reunion and helplessness against their fate. Symbolism. Diamonds. In the occult, diamond is the symbol of the pyramid with the eye on the top, the ancient eye of Providence, the eye of Horus. And Horus is the representation of the rise of the consciousness, new order, when the old, corrupted order, Osiris, falls. In Moulin Rouge, this is the values passed down on Christian from his father and his warnings, which Christian breaks down only to mature through Satine. Therefore, Satine is the sparkling diamond.
The sparkling diamond.
Sparkling because she attracts the eye. Attracts Christian's attention. For example, the urban myth about magpies tells of their preference for shiny objects. Magpie is also a person who hoards small objects. So Christian is Horus, the bird who represents the sun as he brings it into the dark, just like Prometheus who brings fire to the people made of clay. Another dull parallel, which is another version of the ascendant of the awareness myth. In its pure form, this symbol represents ascendance of consciousness and power guided by moral values, but in its corrupt form, it honors materialistic values as the top of the hierarchy, which is the form that's represented in Moulin Rouge, as Satine, being the sparkling diamond, is her representing the frolics and pleasures of the flesh, but it's also an epithet to her goddess-like presence. This is confirmed by its appearance when things go wrong. When Satine descends into the underworld, the scene where she sings The Material Girl, where the Jew gives her the diamond necklace, and when she's adorned by diamonds in the final show after she abandons Christian. The last scene is particularly interesting given her horn-like adornments, diamond eye on her forehead, and diamond necklace, which together form the pyramid with the eye in its center. After Christian appears, however, she's dressed in white and now wings adorn her head. She regains the virgin-like qualities and is redeemed. This dark aspect is the vanity of the world and the ever-vigilant and intrusive power guided by desire, elite elevation and veneration of Lucifer, as desire and pyramid symbols appear in Luciferianism as well. For Christian, it represents the opening of the eye, the rise of consciousness, and its guidance through the confrontation with the dark aspect of reality and the search of the sexual instincts and maturation, as this is the role Satine represents for Christian. She opens his eyes. That is, through her, He brings the consciousness out of the unconscious and grows up. Satine. Satine is the queen of the underworld, Hades, Zidlus, Persephone. At the same time, she's a celestial, mystical and fantastical creature, the embodiment of Christians' ideals, values and fantasies. She's seen as the Virgin Mary despite her being, well, basically a whore, which is never really mentioned by Christian, which only emphasizes how deep in his fantasy he's plunged, but also underscores his Christ-like qualities, as he judges one's heart only. Therefore, this isn't just a story about the transformative power of love. It's the story of the tragic death of the innocence, of the purity and unawareness we're born with, which must die in order for oneself to survive in the world and get individualized, which includes acceptance of pain, suffering, loss and death, the negative, often repressed aspects of the world. That's why at the end of Moulin Rouge, Satine must die. Another mythological reason could be explained by the Bible. Satine represents a fallen angel, and in the Bible it's indicated that fallen angels don't have the opportunity to return to God, and are therefore condemned to damnation. That's the tragic element of the story, thanks to which, however, the story manages to portray the reality of our own lives very accurately. Life, being full of suffering and tragedy, seems to be intent on steering us towards nihilism, especially when one embodies the faith and values that prevent us from falling into this abyss is lost. But what does Christian do? He tells their story. He goes on only to fulfill Satine's last wish. He cherishes and upholds love and hope. And so, even after the faith is destroyed, its ashes remain, and from these ashes, just like the crucified Christ who steps out of the tomb after enduring great suffering, Christian carries on living. And he's devastated and drowns in alcohol, but he keeps on going, and maybe someday, from the ashes, the phoenix will rise again. Indian mythology parallels. Red and white, Sati and Parvati, elephants. There are some significant mythological connections between the symbols used in Moulin Rouge and Indian mythology. The plot of the spectacular show is set in India.
India! It's set in India!
And parallels the story of Satine and Christian, and there's a giant elephant structure. Let's first look at the elephant.
Unbelievable! Straight to the elephant!
Interestingly enough, in Christianity, elephants in ancient artworks are associated with Adam and Eve. A fallen elephant used to represent the fall of man from paradise into sin, but a standing one symbolized chastity. We see the interplay between these two qualities in Moulin Rouge very clearly. In Buddhism and Hinduism, it's the white elephant that embodies purity, but the grey one is the symbol of agitated, untrained mind that strays off from the path towards enlightenment. If we look at the elephant in Moulin Rouge, we talk about the inside of the elephant. It parallels descendants into hell. It's the belly of the whale Pinocchio gets swallowed by. And in the original Moulin Rouge elephant in Paris, men were entertained by belly dancers there, which underscores this meaning. The Whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman. In Game of Thrones, this is Melisandre. This figure, also called the Mother of Abominations, appears in the Bible riding a seven-headed beast. She's associated with the lowly nature of the human being, fornication, the female sexual impulse and liberation. The word whore can also be translated as idolatress, which suits Satine, as that's what she's for Christian. He's seduced by her into the world of the underworld. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. She's the seductress that leads men into sin and the embodiment of the dark aspect of the anima. There are also some hints at parallels between Satine and the Indian goddess Sati and her reincarnation Parvati. Sati, the wife of Shiva, sacrificed herself and was later reborn as Parvati and remarried Shiva, and later gave birth to the elephant-headed god, Ganesha. Satine also dresses mainly in red, just like all these goddesses, the Whore of Babylon, Sati and Parvati. Red is the core color of Moulin Rouge, meaning red mill, as it's the color of passion, desire, fire, and libido. On the other hand, there's white, the color of purity, sanctification, and transcendence. During the most intimate moments with Christian, she's dressed in white, as well as when she dies, but she dies on a field of red and white, signifying the final unification of the two opposing forces. The world of sin, embodied by the Duke and Zidler, the material world of Moulin Rouge, and the world of love, embodied by Christian, the divine world, about whose struggle is the whole movie. Orpheus and Eurydice. Moulin Rouge is basically the story of Orpheus and Eurydice retold, as all the elements of the story, including the characters, can be clearly found here. Orpheus was a talented musician and poet who fell in love with and later married the beautiful and graceful Eurydice. The two only lived happily for a short time, however. One day, as Eurydice was walking in the forest, a shepherd started chasing her, attracted by her beauty, and as she was fleeing, she got bitten by a snake and died. Orpheus descended into the underworld to save her, but he was told not to look back before they both came out to the light. He didn't abide by it, and so she was never brought back to life. In Moulin Rouge, not looking back can be interpreted in a similar way. Christian failed to see Satine's illness, for which he failed to save her.